Thanks to stay with us. We're still celebrating Angola's independence at 47, a special broadcast right here on News Central TV. And on the first half, we dealt with the politics and governance in Angola, going back to the history times of how Angola got the independence and unfortunately the civil war just after getting independence from Portugal. And we had lovely guests with us. And right now, we're going to switch gears to issues of economy, one of the major strong points of building a country, and to look at the fact that one of the major reasons why Angola got their independence was a fight against, economic liberation, especially when the Portuguese forced cotton cultivation on them. And this was one of the major reasons why the people stood up and said, no, we're going to have our independence, we're going to rule, have our economy, have our politics all together. How far that has gone? Well, that's what we're having discussions on, especially on the economy. And I'm not alone. I still have with me Dapo.
Yeah, Rita, thank you so much. And of course, it's been a very, very interesting conversation on Angola and the beauties and, of course, all of it concerning Angola. And we have more of that for you at this time. But this time around, we'll be dwelling more on the economy.
Yes,
right.
Definitely. We have our guests with us on the economy. Earlier on, we were mentioning how much of a youthful population that Angola has. I wonder if, because Africa is blessed with population, youthful population, so to say, but I wonder if countries such as Angola, just like Nigeria, have been able to nest this and, build the economy and not just have youths who are just lying on the streets and not doing anything.
I mean, as that a survey recently conducted said about 70% of the Angolan population, that is about 34 million, less than 30 years of age. So that tells you that you have a young, highly productive population. So the big question is Angola maximizing all of that? Are they more of a consumer or productive, country? So all of that. I know that Angola is a major oil exporter. They have gold, they have diamonds, they have all of those natural resources. But the big question is, in terms of utilization, would you say that all of that has been maximized? So, I mean, these are the hanging areas. And also tourism too.
Yeah, you talked about that earlier on.
We nibbled on that, but I'm sure we'll dwell on that, a lot of that.
Definitely. And now going straight into conversations, we're looking at the economy, and we have it all. Oliviera is the CEO, BFA Asset Management. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. And, just before the cameras, you told us of how the good news, the joyful news, the birth of your son. Thank you so much for joining us despite all that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Once again, congratulations, Rui.
Thank you. Yes.
Call him independent
great
baby.
day. Celebrating twice.
Definitely. All right, so let's go straight to the economy of Angola. I mean, I think one of the major points for Angola was the civil war, unfortunately, which lasted far too long than expected after the country's independence. You'd have expected that, political and economic growth will begin. So how much of an effect did the civil war have on the economic growth in Angola?
So the Civil War was, to be fair, sort of a shame that it happened, just because all of the infrastructure destruction that happened in between, and in one way, shape, or form, it also decelerated what could have been already a positive growth all throughout, from an economic point of view, and also a social point of view of the country. So that, taking that out of the way, come forth the peacetime, and that's when actually you then start to see the sort of the cracks in the political structure, which then sort of spilled over to what the economic policies were back then. So essentially, you had a stagnated economy all throughout, maybe from during the 1990s all the way up to early 2000s. And then what happens is from the early 2000s up to maybe today, and then maybe we can get a little bit and speak a little bit more of what's happening today since the pandemic. But from 2002 up to maybe 2009 and 2010, you have an economy that was expanding. So high growth in most of the economy, but specifically in the oil sector, right? This is where we had an oil boom. The price of oil, if we'll recall, was way up, higher than the 100 mark, dollar per barrel. So we were on the high of the oil, right? And that essentially, we took advantage of that to increase in our infrastructure projects. And that included roads, that included building up schools, that including a lot of investment on the real estate as well. So you had a huge growth, for example, in the capital city, Luanda, where you had a lot of infrastructure projects, very important infrastructure projects that you can still see the results today. But on the flip side of that, you also had a big concentration on the oil sector. So we were not able to diversify as much as we wanted to. We've been talking about diversification since the 70s, but we're not able to do that.
And why is that? Why is that?
It's understandable, right? You're coming up from war. You need to quickly move fast and sort of grow fast and rebuild. That's the whole thing. You have to rebuild. And if you have to rebuild, the only resources that you actually have is oil. So the focus was, well, let's use our resources because that's what's going to get us enough money to natural resources to get us enough money to actually rebuild and do all these infrastructure projects that we do need in order to grow. And that included not just roads, that included water and sanitation, that included rebuilding the dams as well. So a lot of that happened in a span of like 10, 15 years.
All right, I would get back to you on the diversification, but I want to talk about the economy generally. Now, there are reports that, when you go to the capital like Luanda, really beautiful, there's a boom in terms of the economy, but it looks like that wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, right? You still have a major bulk of the economy in poverty. Why is that?
I hate to make this comparison, but reality is when we all say, well, the economy is in the hands of a few, if you look at countries that are well developed, what's happening is when you have an accumulation of wealth, eventually you will have a set group of people, whether they're entrepreneurs and maybe even corporations, that will essentially concentrate a lot of that wealth, right? And today in the whole world, you have the trillions and trillions of dollars in the hands of a few as well. So it's only natural that also happens in a country like ours. It's just a natural thing. Now, what really is important to focus is whether or not there's a growth in the middle of the population, as in whether the mid-size, mid companies, small entrepreneurs, whether they can actually grow their business. And I think that's where the focus should lie on, not just looking the past, but also looking forward. So, because when you look at the middle class, it has actually been shrunk. It's been shrunk. That's a fact. So my focus today, at least when I talk to anyone that has sort of a political stance on this, is to look. You need to look into policies that will increase and grow that middle class.
So would you say as a business owner that the policies on ground favor you?
There's been many reforms, right? And the issue with the reforms is they take time. So, it's not just about a piece of paper that you put in and then everything magically will happen. That's not going to happen. What happens is, you put in reforms, which they have since the new presidency that's come in, and it's only been about 5 years, right? So you have to take a full economic cycle to then try to see the repercussions of those policies, whether they're good or bad. So talking from my business perspective, we've been in business for 5 years. We're not grown into being the largest asset management business in the ground. Most of our assets are actually in fixed income, but we're now moving to alternatives. So we're looking to growing our business into investing in local companies, local SMEs. So we want to really progress and be able to support these reforms as well. So that's a long answer to your question, which I would say, yes, I can see some things now. They're starting to come up, as in, population. And I heard your introduction about how the population is growing and whether or not that's being well distributed. So what's happening today is you have a huge ecosystem of entrepreneurs in the country. You have small and medium-sized companies that are coming up, including startups, which to say, if the startup business has already started in Angola, has already kicked off in Angola, and not just an ecosystem, not just having companies per se, but also having the investors there as well. So you have an angel investors, you have incubators. So there's been a kickoff of small and medium entrepreneurs that are coming up and with new ideas, with new businesses, and taking advantage of these reforms. One of them, there's actually an example that I can give to you, which is the central bank has put in allowing mobile banking to actually to be a service that can be provided in the country. And since then, and that's been about maybe 2.5 years, there's been a boom of maybe 3 or 4 mobile money solutions. And those are not international mobile money solutions. Those are made locally. So yes, I think reforms are now starting to take shape, and they're now you can now start to feel the positive sides of it.
Okay, now you talked about business-friendly environment for Angola. In Angola, let's also look at bilateral relations and, of course, the investors. You talked about that earlier. Now, how well or how friendly is it? How much of investments or investors come into Angola?
So that's where, unfortunately, we're lacking. And I've been very vocal about this in many different platforms. So, the country and the region, maybe I'll start off from the region. The region has been able to attract more at around $18 billion worth of private equity money. So those are, private investors, institutional investors, including DFIs, so bilateral, that put in money into private companies. So 18 billion in Angola has received $0 of that. And that's a shame. And those are data in the past 5 to 10 years. Angola has received 0. So which means there's something there that we need to work on being able to attract that type of private capital. So the government, they've done well into establishing relationships, excellent relationships with the likes of African Development Bank, with the World Bank, with the different DFIs. But those are all government projects to finance government projects. So there's a need to try to focus on how do we bring private capital to finance our private companies. And that's that's where definitely we're lacking and we need to work on. I do believe that there's 2 main issues that are in the cause of that. One will probably be on a political sort of mindset that we're in, or social mindset that we're also in, which is, very sort of concentrated on government projects, very focused on government, but we're not moving to thinking, okay, how do we also move the economy through the private sector? And that's why we talk about reforms just before. The government has put in a privatization program, very ambitious privatization program, and that's a reform that is made to focus on, okay, our companies need to be, the economy needs to move by the private sector, which essentially will then link into growing up the middle class.
All right, now still talking about reforms and all that, just hold on that thought. We're still looking at the growth, the economical growth in Angola. There's a package that has been developed by our new Central TV team. So we'll take it and then we'll get back right into discussions. Do stay tuned.
Angola's economy, like any other economy, can best be analyzed and understood by looking at the country's economic indicators. Let's begin with a breakdown of Angola's gross domestic product, its GDP, its national output. Angola's economy generated $72.5 billion in 2021 according to the World Bank. This makes Angola the 74th largest economy in the world. It comes just after Ghana and just above Côte d'Ivoire. The country, with a population of 30 million people, has a GDP per capita or a GDP per head of $2,137,000. By this measure, it is ranked 166th in the world. This puts it just below the Democratic Republic of Congo at 165th, but above both Nigeria and Ghana, who are 168th and 169th in the world respectively. Much of Angola's economic output or income comes from the country's oil and gas sector, which accounts for 50% of its GDP, 70% of government revenue, and over 90% of exports. This year, Angola, a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries or OPEC, became Africa's largest oil producer, taking over from Nigeria. It produces about 1.16 million barrels of oil every day. This has given the country an economic boost in this season of relatively high oil prices. As a result, Angola is expected to record a budget surplus that should be around 1.6% of its GDP in 2022. Its debt to GDP ratio is expected to fall to 78.9%, and the value of its exports is expected to exceed the value of its imports this year. The Africa Development Bank expects that the country's economy will grow at 2.9% in 2022. This is an improvement from the 2021 figure of 0.8%. After being in recession from 2015 to 2020, this is a good turnaround. Agriculture is a significant contributor to Angola's economy. It accounts for 10% of the country's GDP and employs over half of its people. Angola used to be a major exporter of agricultural products like coffee and maize, but this industry was decimated by the country's civil war, which lasted from 1975 to 2002. Nevertheless, Angola remains rich in agricultural potential. Currently, only 10% of its 35 million hectares of arable land are cultivated. However, it isn't doing too badly where agriculture is concerned. It is the 7th largest producer of banana in the world, the 9th largest producer of cassava, and the 10th largest producer of sweet potato. Angola also has a thriving mining sector. It is one of the top 10 diamond producers in the world, and the precious stone contributes 5% to the country's exports. This year, the country's mines turned out the largest pink diamond seen in around 300 years. The 170-carat gem has since been named the Lulo Rose. These developments have had a positive impact on the country's currency, the Kwanza. It's up 13.47% against the dollar this year so far, and up 22.23% since November last year. It is one of the best performing currencies in the world. The strong performance of its currency has shielded it from the surging inflation reported by so many countries. Its inflation rate has fallen from 27.7% in January this year to just below 20% in August. In the short to medium term, the World Bank expects Angola's economy to grow at around 3% every year. This will be powered by improvements in the country's non-oil sector, which is expected to compensate for the structural decline in oil production. Climate change is a key concern of the country's government, as its economy is vulnerable to droughts, the rise in sea levels, and flooding. Last year, at the UN General Meetings, Angola's president, Joao Lourenço, asked the world to do more in the fight against climate change. In spite of this, Angola's economy continues to grow from strength to strength. With continued successes in the transformation of the country's economic model into a sustainable and inclusive economy powered by private sector growth, Angola could rise from its position as Africa's 6th largest economy to take on the continent's giants, Nigeria and South Africa. Damilola Adeoye, News Central TV.
Watch that, Lola. Of course, Ray, there's lots of wonderful facts coming from Angola, talking about the agricultural potential, banana, cassava mining sector, diamonds, I mean, even the currency and all of that. But I have one question for you, Rui. How has this impacted the lives of Angolans? Because it's one thing to have the numbers, but is this also reflecting the lives of Angolans?
That's a fair question. I think, you know, it's and which is difficult to actually perceive this, but you know, I've said early on that there's a few signs as to how those numbers are actually impacting the everyday lives of young, at least the young Angolans. You see it from the up and coming entrepreneurs. And that's why you now starting to see a developing startup ecosystem in the country. So that's on the flip side, on the positive side. But then on the other side of things, yes, there's still much work to do. The levels of the life, the cost of living is still quite high in Angola. And that's a tough thing for everyone, whether you're talking from, someone who is not in the middle class, which usually are the ones that are well impoverished. So I do believe that there's needs to be a focus on that side of the population, and how do we transform the lower middle income to a middle income type of population, and really decrease. Now, the story of decreasing poverty, as we as Africans, we know that that's a difficult conversation, and that's a difficult task from various reasons, right? Especially the reason for diversification. When you only have one single sort of resources. Obviously, you have other resources that the video really well shown, but the issue is not just having them available. The issue is how do you use those in order to increase the level of input in the country, which you haven't been able to do.
All right, Rui, I want to pick it up from there. You talked about the cost of living, which of course is part of what I highlighted to want to ask you. But I want to put this within the context of post-COVID. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic put the world in a very precarious economic situation. A lot of countries are trying to come out of its effects. How would you say, COVID affected the Angolan economy, and what are the recovery measures put in place at the moment?
So, it's a bit strange to say this, but reality is, since 2021, Angola has taken huge advantage of the high oil prices. So we've actually grown our GDP for the first time in 5 years.
So it was a positive effect.
Yes, it was.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. It's the strangest thing, right? So to us, there was a huge shift. So you had shutdowns, which for maybe about a few months we had a big issues. But once the commodity prices started sort of coming up, we took full advantage of that. So the services sector, for example, has been growing. So you have maybe around 2.2% now growth year on year since 2020. And then you also have the non-oil sectors that have also grown respectively. The agriculture, unfortunately, is a sector that hasn't been able to grow, but that's, again, I think that's also part of the structural issues that we have in the country. But then, like I said, you have other services, you have other non-oil industry that has also grown. As a total, you've seen around maybe 5% growth year on year. So, and the Kwanzaa, by the way, has also been able to stabilize. in the past quarter, and definitely in a year-on-year since 2021. So that's a positive thing there. Now, whether the question, because I always like to see things from two perspectives, right? So now the perspective will be, okay, so whether or not you can translate that into the everyday lives of Angolans, whether or not you've been able to see Angolans that are having access to credit, whether or not you're able to see Angolans being able to thrive as entrepreneurs. So those are the questions that I would like to see them answer in the upcoming years, which they haven't been answered yet, right? So let's see.
Okay, now Rui, all over the world we're dealing with the COP27 summit, and earlier when we talked about politics and governance, that was one of the major issues we highlighted. Now, oil is a major factor for Angola, and right now the world is talking about cutting greenhouse gas emissions and switching over to renewable energies. And you talked about how, unfortunately, the COVID-19 had more of a positive turn for Angola due to the large producer of oil. Now, I wonder, how would the whole climate change discussions, affect the economy of Angola, especially when you talk about diversification of Angola's economy?
So, the green agenda is a critical agenda, both economic and political. As whether or not how that is going to affect a country like Angola is still remains to be seen. You have a few signs of how we can take advantage of that, we as a country. Where, for example, the US has just committed 2.2 billion into renewable energy. So those are government-led PPP projects, actually, for renewable energy in the country. But you also now have structural reforms for renewable energy. And you also have a few investors, local investors, that are now starting to be concerned about, where can they put their money to work into alternative sectors that are not harmful to the environment, and maybe sectors that have a positive outcome in a social perspective. So the so-called ESG factors that are now starting to be very important for local companies. On the other hand, again, we have to go back to reality. Angola is still very reliant on oil. So to then sort of shift that into green energy is going to be a difficult transition. It's not going to be easy. It's good, I don't have obviously a crystal ball to know whether or not this is going to take 10 or 20 years. There's a commitment to the government for 2030. Because we also signed for the COP26 and during and we're now looking to see what's going to happen during COP27. But regardless of that agenda, we know that the dependency on oil is a critical view. It's a critical situation there. So we have to see a change there first before we start talking about other sort of measures to deal with the green economy. And to be fair, Angola is now one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. But we also have support from and I mentioned the US, but we also have support from Germany, that they're now supporting a big, massive project in hydro investments. I really, as an investor locally, and also seeing from a perspective of what's happening also in the region, I'm still very skeptical, but I'm also hopeful that eventually we'll start to look and see things from a different lens, from an ESG lens.
All right, thank you so much, Rui Oliviera, for joining us on this conversation. Of course, we do hope for the best in Angola as we celebrate 47 years of independence and, of course, economic growth, as you clearly well highlighted. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast.
Yeah, once again, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
And right now, away from the economy, we're going to switch gears to security. But right now, we'll go for a quick break. When we come back, we have discussions on security in Angola. Do stay tuned. Joao, hi.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Thank you for joining us. We will be with you shortly.
Certainly.
And congratulations once again.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay,
Much
so just to
appreciated.
get your name clearly, I want to know if I'm correct. Joao de Morais. Did I get that correctly?
Almost.
Almost. Okay, so help me out.
Almost there.
Okay, so could you help me out with that?
It's Joao Morais.
Morais. Wonderful. Okay, Dapo, I think I'll leave that to
Jorash.
you. All right, thank you so much, Joao.
Thank you for staying with us. We are still celebrating Angola at 47. And of course, at this time, we will be discussing the security situation in this very beautiful country. Joining us at this time is Joao de Morais, is actually a senior military analyst based in Luanda, Angola. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you once again.
All right. Once again, congratulations. And how are you celebrating? Let's start off with that.
Oh, we are. It's a great celebration. It's always a very special moment for us. And this year in particular, we are feeling very joyful. So it's going great so far.
All right.
All right. Okay. Now, Joao, still looking at the security situation or security arrangement in Angola. You are a senior military analyst, of course. This is your area of specialty. And we see kind of the political faction also being part of the military forces in Angola. I mean, how does that happen in Angola?
Well, the situation, the security situation in Angola, it's extremely stable. And that's been stable since 2002 when we reached our peace deal. And the relationship between the security forces and the overall society, it's very even and very good. The Angolan society sees the armed forces and overall security establishment as a source of pride. By the way, our military always position ourselves during historical times. So Angola is a very privileged country when it comes to security and security environment and the overall relationship with the military.
All right. Well, let's bring it down to, of course, the daily life of Angolans. How would you say the streets of the big cities like Luanda, is safe, particularly at night? Because there are reports that Angola, particularly the big cities, have some level of high crime rate. Talking about, from petty theft to, advanced crime. What would be your take on the level of security at the basic level, particularly in the big city?
Well, I would say the overall security when it comes to a crime perspective and the sense of security, it's very decent. Of course, there's a room for improvement, but I would say that the rates are still under control, and the government has been making a lot of efforts in order to improve the situation. The level of investment in the police force has been increasing, and also in terms of awareness. Therefore, of course, there's some theft, some crimes happening. However, I would not say it's something alarming, and the level of the crime does not disencourage any type of investment. So I would say, so far, the levels are very stable. Of course, there's room for improvement. Of course, the security forces are aware that certain mechanisms must be adopted in order to increase the level of security, but it's not something that has achieved an alarming situation so far.
All right, the COVID-19 pandemic saw a sort of surge in insecurities, particularly, across nations, even advanced countries. And the reason is pretty simple. A lot of economies went into a free fall, and people, particularly cost of living, became, very high. Would you say, even though Angola recorded, according to, making reference to a recent conversation, said they recorded some level of boom in the economy, would you also say that in terms of security, did the COVID-19 pandemic influence the level of security there?
Well,
Anyway.
it's hard to deny it. Of course, the COVID-19 affected every part of the society, and the security has not been different. However, I would say that not many changes has affected when it comes to how we perceive our security system. Of course, there's been certain methods that has been adapted to adjust to the limitations that COVID brought to the society. But I would not say that it has changed too much. And our security force has a very quick capability to adapt to this pandemic. And it's important also to state that the armed forces and the overall security played a very, very important role when it comes to the combat against COVID-19.
Okay, now Joao came for a second term in August, and it came with a lot of policies. One of them was fighting corruption. Now, I'm looking at the issue of security. What political support do the Angola armed forces have from the government?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. Could you
All right, I was
that?
asking that what sort of political support does the Angola armed forces have from the government?
The critical. So I'm having a bit of issue to hear. Could you speak slightly louder, please?
Okay, I was talking about political support for Angola armed forces. How much support does it have?
Oh, it has a great support. As you know, our armed forces are going through a restructuring. However, the connection between the armed forces and the government in terms of support, it's very good. The government has been supporting with the new infrastructure, especially in the north, and I would say it's a really going well process.
And looking at the restructuring, what are the areas that are being considered for the restructuring?
Well, the restructure is a novel restructuring. We started this process in 2007 and went from 2012, and now we are in the second phase of the restructuring. We are going through the process of modernization, also redimensioning of the armed forces. And I would say the maritime forces are the main forces that have been
Can you hear me, Joao? Okay, we're still looking at situations in Angola, especially talking about security, and talked about restructuring the first part and then the second part. Joao, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
All right, please go on.
Yes, and that's, as I said, the maritime forces are going through a great restructuring, and also the Air Force. We are going through a process of redimensioning our forces by reducing the number and also improving in terms of capability, in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of air capability, and maritime also capability.
All right, I want to pick on the political aspects there. Angola, for now, in terms of being democratic enough, one might want to say it's still developing. And the beauty of democracy is representation. Do you think that the people are properly represented such that we don't see uprisings or protests that could lead to what we are seeing probably in countries like Gambia and Burkina Faso, in Angola?
No, that's almost impossible to happen. As you know, Angola has been in war for too many years, and since we achieved the peace in 2002, the process was a very well structured process that not only included the armed forces but also the overall political parties, and the integration and from both parties of the fighting forces was being complete, and also the political process was very well established. Therefore, it's highly unlikely, and I don't think this will ever happen by the way the peace process was made. Angola not only achieved the peace, but also created a political process that allowed all the parties to come together as one. Therefore, it's highly unlikely, and I don't see that happening in any future.
All right, still on that, I want to take you back to the Civil War. Are there shadows of the Civil War that still sort of reflect, even till now, in Angola, that, some people might feel, oh, some issues have not been properly trashed out, and, looking for the opportunity to sort of vent out? Are there still shadows of the Civil War that still bellow?
No, I wouldn't say so, because the way the peace process was structured was in fact so well presented that it has been lesson learned from both sides, and the political impact of the peace has been so well integrated into the society that there has been no shadows or any type of backlash from the war. People in Angola, they want peace, and the peace in Angola it's something that the Angolan people actually valued, and it's also became cultural. And we are daily remembered and how much we fought to get to this point. Only by having peace, it's possible to have economical development, social development, actual development, critical infrastructure, light, water, schooling to the kids. Therefore, the Angolan people, they see the Civil War as a very bad memory that we want to keep away from us. Of course, we learn the lessons. We know why things went wrong, and the most important fact is there's no grudge between any parties. If you see how the political system works in Angola, both parties they have a very healthy relationship. The assembly has been provided a great support as well in this regard. So there's a very live and healthy relationship between everyone. So we don't have any cultural backlash. We don't have any type of symptoms of the war. We really learn our lessons.
Now, Joao, when you're talking about the Civil War, now we know of so much political interference, foreign interference actually, from the United States, from the Soviet Union, and China. Now, looking at the Angola armed forces presently, all over most countries in Africa, if you take a look at Mali and Burkina Faso, there's this anti-French sentiment, anti-colonialist sentiments going on, and just recently we saw the French troops at the Barkhane leave Mali. Now, what exactly would you say is the bilateral relationship between Angola and all the international partners when it comes to terms of security?
Well, Angola has a very balanced position. You know, we had from a technical perspective, and then I'll talk about military capability. We always had a very strong relationship with Russia. Most of our capabilities when it comes to the armaments, I would say it's mainly Russian from historical reasons. But actually from doctrine, we also tend to lean on other countries as well. And so we have a very multilateral relationship. We don't close any doors to any other countries. So you can see doctrine from Portugal, which is also a NATO doctrine. We have doctrine from Russia. We also have from United States. I would say the relationship from a military doctrine hasn't gone too deep, but we are still searching for new ways to cooperate. But Angola doesn't close its door to any partner, and we tend to get the best of everyone.
All right. Now, Angola borders the Democratic Republic of Congo, to the north. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there's, of course, intensified face-off between the government forces, that's the Congolese army, and the M23. What is Angola doing to avoid a spillover of this ongoing crisis?
Oh, Angola has been very, very active in this regard. We have with Congo a border of over 2,000 kilometers. Of course, what happened in Congo, it threatens our security, but not only by our security, but also by thanks to the relationship that we have with our neighboring brothers. Angola has hosted a meeting between the president of Congo and Rwanda just recently. And President Lorenzo also has been making many efforts in order to pacify this region. Just last week, Angola has received the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Rwanda and also from Congo in order to discuss the ongoing negotiation. Angola, for the past couple of years, has been fighting to keep peace in the region, especially in the Great Lakes region, which is very volatile. Angola has been very active. Our foreign minister has traveled to those two countries recently, about 2 weeks ago, and we also received a delegation in Angola in order to discuss the ongoing process. So I would say President Lorenzo is very active in this regard. Recently as well, a couple of months, President Lorenzo has received the prize of Champion of Peace, and thanks to this effort that he has been making.
Okay, now, Joao, over some time now, there's been an accusation on the Angola armed forces, especially when it comes to human rights violations, especially during elections. And it's been said that the ruling party, MPLA, has made use of the armed forces to perpetrate all these actions. How true is that?
That's not true. And even the international partner has said that the role that the armed forces and overall security played in the election was very, very good. And that we had no incidents, we had nothing significant to report. The armed forces played a very low-profile role, creating the condition for the democracy process to unveil smoothly, and that was people voted in peace, and I would say that's not very accurate, and the facts prove that the Angolan election was exceptional from a security perspective.
All right, before we let you go, what are those reforms, on a very personal level, that you would wish, to see in the security apparatus of the state as we speak?
Well, actually, what I would seek to see is already ongoing. Of course, we have to understand that the armed forces in Angola went from a regular warfare armed forces to a peace transition armed forces. Of course, that requires a certain degree of changes from reduction, but also increasing the level of modernization from a technological perspective, bringing new youth to the new structure, and also becoming a bit more cybersecurity aware, I would say, because the threats now are very hybrid. We don't live in a world where the regular situation happens. Now, with the with all the economic struggle, thanks to the Russia and Ukraine, also made us review how our security forces must adapt to the new threats. But so far, Angola has doing the right steps towards a very capable armed forces.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Joao de Morais. I hope I got that correctly for your insight. You talked about all the security implications, of course, security growth in Angola. Thank you so much for being a part of this special broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's been 2 hours. We've dealt on politics and governance. We've dealt on economic transformation and security. And I think one thing I can take from all this is that Angola is a very promising country. I mean, with all what they had suffered, civil war and all that, it still manages to come out of the rubble. So it's applause for Angola. And of course, we wish all Angolans a very wonderful, happy Independence Day celebration.
Yes, for a young country that has achieved so much, in the shortest possible time, it's a big, big plus. Once again, congratulations to Angola.
And I am Rita Omodia. Of course, New Central TV broadcast will have New Central now coming up at 12 noon. Do stay tuned. And of course, to all Angolans, a happy independence celebration.